All right, so okay, so here's our agenda today. A quick check-in. I hope everyone's doing okay. Uh, definitely. So this week I'm going to try something a little different. I'm not going to try assign a chapter assignment just because a lot of people are behind. So I'm not going to assign a chapter assignment for the week just so you guys can catch up with chapter 2 stuff. It's not too difficult. It's just a matter of looking at the reading and submitting it. So you can still turn in the chapter 1 stuff. It's 2 weeks behind, so you lose about 20%. But every week you wait, it gets a little lower. Not that many people turn into chapter 2 stuff, but get that done. Chapter 1 and 2 are important because it teaches us the basic of the writing. Because next week I'm gonna start assigning you guys news stories to write about. So it's gonna be hard for you guys to see the structure of the essays. I mean, not of the articles without the basics of news. But yeah, hopefully that gives you enough time to catch up with not additional news piece. So as we are in unit 2 right now. We are going to do week 5 assignments. So if you looked at it last week, I had you guys do week 2 notes, what you're supposed to do. And some people have been doing it. A lot of you haven't, is click on it. And if you see it, it saves a copy of the outline. And all you got to do, I mean, it's late already, you lose some points, but you still can turn it in, is read the chapter. So it's not much thought process going on. It's just kind of just doing the work. So we did that for chapter 1, and chapter 1 was just kind of learning the basics of journalism. And we had a quiz for it. Not that many people took the quiz. Go back and take it if you haven't already. But we have chapter 2 starting. So today, what we're going to do, if you look at week 5, is we're going to go over chapter 2 notes. I'm going to tell you how to do our assignments for this week. And then starting from now, after the class ends, you have an option, not option, you need to take the quiz for chapter 2. And as all the quizzes, because you're at home, it's all open notes and open book and open everything. So, and you get 2 tries to pass it. So it shouldn't be that difficult. So even if you get a lot wrong the first time, think about what you got wrong, review it, and then go back and look at your notes. Look at because all the questions I take from the PowerPoint I'll show you, I take from the chapter readings. So think about that. All right, so right now I'm gonna go over chapter 2. I'm recording the session just in case some people are able to attend. As I'm opening this up, just as a reminder, you're supposed to do, we're not adding a new chapter, so that gives you enough time for a lot of you who need to catch up on chapter 2 work, because starting next week, we have writing assignments that deal with this. Okay, so let's look over chapter 2. So chapter 2, the basis of it is the basic news story. Basic news story. So remember, first semester, what we're doing is focusing on learning how to write for newspapers. Second semester, I'm going to teach you guys how to write scripts for broadcast. If you have interest in being a writer, like a screenwriter, or even writing scripts for like movies, we're going to do like a basic overview of how to write like scripts and how to write. If we had a time like in class, like personal physical class, I'd have you guys like make videos with each other. Hopefully next semester, we're back in school, which will be really fun. But right now, first semester, our job is to teach you how to be a basic news story. For underclassmen, for the people that are freshmen and sophomores and juniors, you can use this skill and carry it over to next semester. I mean, next year, if you plan to take journalism 2 and be an all-star in our Spartan Shield program. If some of you feel like you're ready to make that jump by next semester, then definitely, it's my 5th period. But it's right now we're learning the basics of writing. All right, so chapter 2 is the basic news story. The basic news story. So, hold up. The key points. So we're going to learn several things. We're going to learn what a lead is. We're going to learn about writing so readers can understand you, social media promotion, inverted pyramid. Let's go to inverted pyramid first. Unlike the way you write essays, articles, if you notice any article, is written in a way that is the opposite. So when you write essays, you usually give background information. You give us you slowly build up, and then the last sentence of your first paragraph is your thesis, right? You go from generic to the most important. The way articles are written, it's different. We start with the most important information at the very, very beginning, and we get to the least important stuff, which is like towards the end. We do that on purpose for the very reason that we explained last time, that I think on average, people only read 25% of what they see, right? They skim. Like anytime you have ever read anything, you probably skimmed the first few paragraphs. You're like, all right, I'm done, I'm over this. And the way newspapers are written is supposed to apply to that. So the very first paragraph, very first sentence, you know exactly what the article is about. We start with the most important information, and then in the beginning, we go with the quotes and the background, and at the very end, we let you know the relatable stuff and the extra information. The very first sentence of an article, it's called the lead. The lead, or some journalists use the LEDE, or you can use the LEADS. But the lead is anywhere from 1 to 2 sentences, and it's no more than 25 to 35 words, and it's written very specifically. The job is to get the reader's attention, number one, but I didn't put it here. But the job is to get the 5 W's: who, when, what, where, and why. The lead, and writing the lead is the most important. It is. You should be able to understand everything the article is about after reading that first sentence, right? Let me exit from this real fast. Let's go to like LA Times. If I were to click on, hopefully it doesn't make me do a paywall. Yes, it did. Maybe if I go to a different one, there's like paywalls now. We talked about this in last week. All right, so first sentence of this paragraph. After 2 days spent spinning less than 150 miles off the coast of Alabama, Florida, and Mississippi, Sally finally made it to, this is actually a feature lead. This is actually an opinion page. Let's go to one that is, okay. Wisconsin poll shows Biden narrowing. All right, so the first sentence, this is the leader here. Former Vice President Joe Biden holds a narrow edge in the key battleground state of Wisconsin, as President Trump's law and order message has so far failed to translate into significant support over the change of dynamic of the race. So in this very first sentence, the lead, we understand what the article is about. We know the who, Joe Biden. We know the what. He has a narrow edge against President Trump. We know the where, which is in the state of Wisconsin, and we know the why slightly, right? If you look at any other article, it follows that same thing. So if you guys follow sports, I hit the paywall already. Let's go New York Times. Floodwaters rushed through the parts of Alabama and Florida on Wednesday, turning roads to rivers, submerging cars, and sending several out-of-control construction barges into water along the Florida Panhandle. We know the who. We're talking about the floods. We know the what. the floods are destroying things. We know the where, which is Alabama. So if you look at any first sentence of articles, the lead, it always gives us the 5 W's really. And that's what I want you to see that, the 5 W's, the lead. In the very first 25 to 35 words, we understand what the article is about. All right, so in the second paragraph of articles, maybe the third even, they call it the nut graph. And it sounds funny, and because if there's an old saying, in a nutshell, what does that mean, right? If I say in a nutshell, what are you trying to talk about, Brian? What I'm trying to say is, what's the purpose? What's the goal? What's the most important thing? So the nut graph, so the lead gives us the important facts. The nut graph explains the lead and makes a connection to the rest of the story. So for example, we have here, the lead is electricity was finally restored for 3,000 shivering Troutdale residents Friday. We know who, Troutdale, we know what, electricity, we know where, it's Troutdale, we know when, Friday. So we had the key information. In the nut graph, we get an explanation and it connects us to the story. Power repair crews worked for more than 72 hours after Monday night's ice storm, downed dozens of power lines. So this gives us more information. We have the lead, we have the nut graph. So if we go over here, go back to our example. We have our lead right here, which is talking about Florida waters brushes through parts of Alabama and Florida on Wednesday, turning roads to rivers, submerging cars, and sending several out-of-control construction barges into waters along the Florida Panhandle as Hurricane Sally dumped a torrent of rain along its path. So this is our lead. We understand what the gist of the article is about. This is our nut graph. The surging water reached higher than 5 feet in Pensacola, Florida, and slammed a barge into a section of Pensacola Bay Bridge that was under construction. And you see, we start getting paragraphs that gives us more and more details. It gives us more details. So going back to this, all right, so we have this inverted pyramid. Articles are written this way because we know that people have short attention spans. They might not read the rest of the article. So assuming that they read just the first and second paragraphs, you want to make sure the first and second paragraphs has the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, and the how. And then we get to our quotes, and then we get to the things. All right, when you look at a story, so if I assign a story to you, and we're going to start doing that next week, we're going to start our writing process. You need to find the focus. All right, so if I give you a story on the Special Olympics at HB High School, what's the focus? Should it just be on the Special Olympics in total? Maybe, but it could be boring. Find the focus. Is there like a athlete, the star athlete? Is this the first Special Olympics since quarantine started? Is this we have some conflict, some drama? Or if I give you a new story on the football team. So last year we wrote several stories on the football team. 1 or 2 years ago, is it just about the season starting, or is it about how they had to play without a football field, right, for one of the years, I think? Or the basketball team, or the volleyball. Or if I had to give you a story about the volleyball team, what's the focus? Is that they're just starting their season? Or 1 year we wrote about how the coach was going back to the military because she was enlisted into, I think, the Army. So there's a lot of stories beneath stories. It's not always just this event. So what is the focus? What is the real story behind things? All right, so we talked about this last time, but hard news presents the facts first and often details the results of an event. Hard news is usually a little more serious events. Find the focus. What is the point of it you're trying to communicate to readers? For example, what did the mayor say? What law was passed? What crime was committed? If I give you a story on the changing schedule, school HB going to block schedule, What's the focus? Who is affected, right? What's the point? Why did it change? All stories should contain quotes, facts, information to support the focus. So if you have a story about the block schedule, you should go get quotes from students, from parents, from teachers, from admin. The lead exists so readers can get the most important information in case they don't read the entire story, right? So we talked about that earlier. If they are lazy, which most people are, and I admit that, we read only the headline and the first few paragraphs. We make sure that the lead can give everyone the same thing. We talked about it before, but the first article we're going to do, we're going to do a group interview of our guest speaker, and we're going to have to write an article of what's happening. All right. How to find the focus. So when you're looking at a story, what's the story about? What do you find interesting? What readers also find this interesting? What impact does this have on readers? Think about that. You guys are writing for, in the future, you're writing for a larger public if you get into journalism. But for you guys, you're writing for a student body. What's important for kids your age to know, or parents, or teachers? How would you relate this information to your friends? So we're speaking in a way that is relatable. We said this before, all news stories answer the basic question: who, what, when, where, why, and how. They, and perhaps all writing, should also answer this question: so what? So the thing that makes things news, and we talked about that in thorough for chapter 1, but do people care about the story, right? What's the point about writing about the dog fashion show if no one cares? We want something that actually matters, especially for your demographic. You guys are more in tune with what's happening that affects kids in your generation and your population. So you should be a little more aware of what's important. So when we start brainstorming ideas, okay, for stories, I want you guys to really give me some input of what's important. My ideas might turn out to be lame because I'm old, and you guys are a little more hip with what's happening. All right, so here are some basic things. The structure, right? So if you go to like a news story, let's go back to this one. We have the very first thing, the headline. The headline is the first line of a story right here, or we could call it the title of a story. It's Hurricane Sally live updates, hundreds of homes flooded in Florida, right? Or if I go to something else, wildlife updates, blazes scorch habitats for endangered species, right? So the headline is the line at the top of the story. So if it is a newspaper, it is what's telling us information. It should grab your attention, but it should also give us information of what the story is about. I hate our new age, like you see BuzzFeed, it goes like, oh, 10 things that, 10 ways to change your life, right? You wouldn't believe number 4. I hate that so much because that's not a real headline. That's just clickbait. The term clickbait means they just want you to click on it, even though it doesn't matter. Headlines should tell you what the story is about and should draw your attention. We talked about the lead, which is the 1 or 2 sentences that is 25 to 35 words that gives us the who, what, when, and where. And the nut graph is the sentence or paragraph that follows the lead and gives us more information. Remember, you guys have a quiz after class ends. So, and this is all stuff from our chapter 2 reading. All right, quotes. All good stories should have quotes from people, because that gives us, when you guys are go out there looking at making stories, it's important for you to get quotes because it gives us some more life to your stories, or else it's just your words. You want all good news stories have quotes. And let's go to this one right here. If you see, we have our lead. The fast-moving fires have swept through Western United States, have wiped out critical populations of endangered species and incinerated native habitats that have taken years to recover, if they recover at all. So the lead tells us that there's fires in Western United States. We know what's happening. And then the nut graph. Fire is a critical part of ecosystem in the West, and many plants and animals depend on it to thrive. But the heat and intensity of the wildfires in now ravaging California, Oregon, Washington, and other Western states are so destructive that wildlife in some areas struggle to recover. So we're talking about our lead, our nut graph, and then we have a quote from someone. Some of the places we set aside may be fundamentally impacted by change and may not be able to come back, said Amy Winthrop, Deputy Director of Washington's Department of Fish and Wildlife. That's just reality. Okay. If you look at this, I want you to see, we lead, nut graph, quotes, right? It would be very boring without a quote right away. Then we usually have quotes from other people within what that is affecting. All right, the word attribution, it means source. So if you see attribution, it defines the source of information. So in the quotes, we give attribution. Let's go back to the third paragraph. Right here. We give the quote and it says, said Amy Winthrop, Deputy Director of Washington Department of Fish. So we gave her credits. This is what you call it, attribution. You attribute. That's what the verb means, to give credit for. Who said the quote? Our job is also to give context. So we had our lead, we had our nut graph, we had our quote, and then you give context. Context means background information, history, things that give us more. So right here, we get more context. After the quote, you see this, and I could do this for any article. With millions of acres across the West blackened by fire, the impact of human has been clear. Lives lost, tens of thousands of people forced to flee their homes, possessions and livelihoods destroyed, and the state has firefighting resources have been stretched beyond limit. Residents are beginning to question whether the changing fire would make their homes too dangerous to inhabit. Less obvious is the long-term impact to native species. All right, so context, we got a little more context. We learned about the wildlife. We give more relevant facts. Elaboration, it comes from the verb elaborate. It means to give more supporting evidence. So context gives background information. Elaboration, you give more supporting evidence. So similar, but it gives us more beyond. And then the ending, the tale of the story. Most stories end with either a future action, more elaboration, or quotes. The quote at the end of a story, an article, is called the kicker. So let's look at our story here. How did they decide to end it? All right, so here's our kicker. It's too soon to tell the impact, Mrs. Palermo. Birds can fly out on harm's way. Animals can seek refuge underground, but some wildlife may return to find the old growth forests they rely on are gone. That is a good quote because it's saying that things may never go back to normal. This is our kicker, the last quote in a story, an article. It's called the kicker. And then here is the last paragraph. The impact of hundreds of thousands of acres of barren slopes may spread well beyond the fire's reach and remain once the flames are out. The Oregon Department of Fire and Wildlife is bracing for winter rains that could wash ash and silt into local streams and impact endangered salmon. Oh, there's actually one more quote. We're already thinking about how we can respond to that. It's important to do this restoration work now to try to minimize the impact. All right, so it ends there. The last quote, the kicker, and then the point of the story is to kind of give us like a finale, to give us the end to it. You're not supposed to give us new information. You just kind of wrap up what happens in the story. All right, so when you're doing news stories, fairness and accuracy is the most important thing. To be fair, you know, people say you're not being fair in life. But what does that mean? If there's a conflict in the story, means if there are multiple sides, always get comments from both sides. That's your job. So if I ask you to go out and do a story on conflict between students and teachers, and you only get quotes from students, that is an unbalanced article. You aren't giving the teachers a fair shot. If we're doing a story on Clippers versus Laker fans, and we only get quotes from Laker fans, we're not giving a balanced story. And if you saw what happened yesterday to the Clippers, you see that they're getting killed up there. So what you're saying is, to be fair and to be accurate, you got to give both sides. And one of the key things we do is avoid one source stories. So if I have a story on a fight that happened in the cafeteria, and my only witness is Elijah, and he's just telling me like, oh yeah, I saw this, I saw that, blah, blah, blah. And I just wrote down everything he said. The problem with that is it could be bias. If I'm judging an event based on the sole eyes of one person, there's a lot of problems. It's all based on his perspective and point of view. But if I have Denise and Brian, Elijah all giving me their perspectives, then I could give you a clearer picture, because the truth is somewhere in between all those people's point of view. But having one source for a story, it limits the accuracy and the truthfulness. All right, so article dues. Always use attribution. So never give me a quote without telling me where that quote came from, because you can make it up. It could be a false story. If a story can benefit from a visual, use one. I recommend always having a visual. We're kind of limited in our ability to go take pictures of stuff right now, but you have the power of Google to find pictures. There's some other things right here, summary blurb, but what you see is something called, oh, Brian, what's up?
Oh, that was an accident, mister.
Oh, sorry. All right, so pull quote. A quote from the story placed in a larger type to entice readers. So let me show you what a pull quote is. Let's go to maybe like article, Vanity Fair, which is a magazine. So we're looking. Oh, it's kind of hard to see from here. Sometimes if you look at magazines, you see that one quote is displayed larger than the rest. Like you see it in different areas. Right here, it usually happens in magazines, sometimes in newspapers, but this is called a pull quote, because we pull the quote from the article, and it's just supposed to get people to come. So we do that in our HP Spartan Shield articles. So let's go this one. We got a pull quote right here. The point of it is to choose the strongest quote that's happening and to entice readers. So this is a quote from the story. So the real question is, does sex still remain taboo around teens and other people of this generation? Yeah, so a pull quote is you get a quote and you just make it larger. All right, when you're using quotes, and you're going to refer back to this chapter 2 stuff in the future when we have our writing articles, don't use quotes to repeat information. Instead, quotes should provide more information and push the story forward. So for example, this is bad. Richie said he had fun at the event. And then his quote says, I had fun at the event, Richie said. That is the most useless quote you could add to a story. All right, it doesn't push the story forward, doesn't give us new information, it's not interesting at all. However, if it said, Richie said he had fun at the event, and then his quote says, I felt like I was 8 years old again. Richie said, I laughed. I laughed so hard, tears rolled down my cheeks, and I nearly spilled my popcorn. You see, that's an interesting quote compared to me saying he had fun, and then his quote saying he has fun. Use quotes that are interesting and worded in a way that is unique. If you ask someone about, let's say, the fires outside, like, what do you think? And you're like, the guy says, no, the sky looks pretty. That is very boring. So we're always trying to push them to say more. If they said something like the fluffy clouds look like memory foam pillows, right? Whatever. The goal is to get them to say more than it's expected. They want interesting quotes. There's no point in putting a boring quote just to put a quote. The other side actually put it twice. All right. When you're writing quotes, commas and periods always go inside of quotation marks. So, example, he asked, comma, quotation mark, when does the semester end? Question mark, quotation mark. Who said, comma, quotation, I hope it ends soon. This is a little different. So you see that there's different ways to write quotes, but when you're writing it, try to follow this structure. Look at this example. Yes, which is good. I like food, quotation mark, I like food, comma, quotation, Richie said, period, quotation, food tastes good. You wouldn't want to put Richie said twice in it just because it gets too repetitive. All right, don't add long explanations to quotes. Let the quotes speak for themselves. Example, I like food, Richie said as he took 3 massive bites of a bean burrito while staring into the sunset and debating whether or not should move to Kansas and start an almond farm that hires only left-handed people with purple hair. Silly, but for articles, we're trying to give as much information in the shortest amount of time. It feels like a long magazine article and you're doing like this full thing on Michael Jordan or like on a Kobe Bryant, then yeah, you have a little more room to be a little more creative with your language. But for articles right now, quotes and your quote. All right. So when you're taking quotes from people, limit the use of partial quotes. People on a normal basis, they speak in a way that's not very conducive to writing quotes. So try your best to just pull the good stuff. If you have to put too many ellipses, like dots, then it's not good. You're trying to eliminate that. Use attribution for direct quotes and paraphrases. So if you're interviewing a police officer about an incident that happened, hold on. So Brian, you put, do we have to input our names if we quote ourselves like Brian explained, or can we? If you're a writer, you're not going to put your own quote. You're just going to put it as a statement, Brian. Does that make sense? You wouldn't quote yourself. That's you quote other people. All right. Use attribution for direct quotes. So I'll let you type that, Brian. So use attribution direct quotes. If you get information, if like if I said it as a slang, Brian, just maybe ask me, unmute yourself and like just what was your question?
You know how like you would quote yourself? Because I was reading the chapter 2 notes. It was saying that you, I think it referred to saying that you would also have to quote yourself, like you're using certain context, like saying you're like, if you're doing it, like when I mean slang, I mean like you talk in a third person view or like a kind of like a first person view. Not really. No, you don't talk in the first person view. And then like in an article, you kind of talk in the third person view, don't you? As in, like you're saying, you're referencing to other people. You're not saying I said this, and I was just saying, like, do you say like if you're like talking to somebody, do you refer to like saying I said this, or do you just not include yourself at all?
You don't include yourself. You just your job is to get them to say the quote and try to mix that into your writing. You're trying to make yourself as little as involved as possible.
Okay.
Someone asked me if it's okay, is it fine if I've been taking notes? Yeah, you can take notes. The goal, you can take notes. Hopefully the outline is able to help you go through it. So let's go back to this. So if I told you to interview, okay, write a story about what happened about a robbery that happened on Pacific, right? Um, and then you go interview a police officer. Any information you get from that police officer, even if it's a direct quote or you're just summarizing or paraphrasing what he said, you have to give them credit. I wonder if I could find an example of that right now. So let's say, the starting. So I have local news. Let's do this fire again. All right, so you see this right here? During the lead, they say, firefighters on Wednesday, September 16th, continued keeping the Bobcat fire from reaching the Mount Wilson Observatory while also working on to control a 7 to 1,000 acre fire that erupted in Cooper Canyon. Authorities said, right? That's our attribution. Later on, we're going to explain who the authorities are. But even though this is not a direct quote, we're getting this information directly from a source. So we have to attribute that source, which is the authorities. Authorities said. You don't need to attribute facts, but always attribute accusations. So if someone tells you something that is, everyone knows is true, then you don't have to give anyone a attribution facts. But if they're making accusations, always, because you don't want to be reliable. Let's say Aradani is like, yeah, Mr. Ta is a jerk, right? Even though that's not a fact, you want to include that for whatever reason. You want to make sure that you put Aradani said that, because you're accusing someone of doing something. You as a writer, your job is to report the news. You don't want to get in trouble. But what you don't get in trouble if you just put quotes from other people of them saying things. So for news stories, we use said, right? It's always said. I know in writing, if you're writing like a script or a story or a book or something, they encourage you to use vivid words like explained, shouted, screamed. Those are too subjective. And remember, in the past we talked about objective is not having bias and subjective is having bias. If I said, or if I wrote down, Brian shouted, I hate you, compared to Brian said, I hate you, you're changing the meaning and you want to step away from influencing what's happening. So we always, for quotes, we just say said. We're not trying to make it more exciting than it needs to be. We're just stating the facts. Most of the time, we do attribution after the quote. So you'll see articles like, here we go. So New York Times. Hopefully we get to look at articles still. Did you see quotes? Here. So we have the quotes, and then we have the attribution. We have the quotes, and then we have attribution. So that means it's always quote, said Richie. I like food, Richie said, right? This is okay, but normally we say, I like food, Richie said. So it's quote, person, and said. This is our last slide. Yeah, this is our last slide. Okay. The first time you introduce someone in a story, we use their first and last name. So we say, ASB is meeting Wednesday, mentions Brian Valdivia, right? After that, after the first time we meet them, you just refer to that person by their last name, not their first name, because that's not respectful. You don't know the people like that. Your job is just to report. So you refer to them, and in the most respectful way is by their last name. If they have like a title, like right here, Police Chief Ron Olin, we capitalize Police Chief if we're putting it in front of them. Principal will be capital Garibaldi. However, if you're not including a first, so if you look right here in the example, Olin, comma, Police Chief of Lawrence, said the crime rate has gone down. If it's after the name, the way it's placed like this, you don't have to capitalize Police Chief. It's only capitalized if it's is presented as the title and before them. So if it's ASB President, Valeria, or English teacher, Mr. Ta, Police Chief, officer, right? Then that's when it's different. So Brian, you asked, so is it better to say it the way they said it, as like shout it, whisper, or just say said? It's better to just say said. Unless you're writing like a magazine article and it's a lot of style to it, like for Rolling Stones, but for most, 90% of the time it's just gonna be said, because you don't want to influence how people feel. You're just giving their quote. All right. That's the end of chapter 2 notes. Remember, you have until the end of next week, before this class, to take this quiz. I would take this as soon as possible. And remember, you have 2 tries to take it. It's open notes, open book. Brian, you have another question? All right, so give you a second. All right, so remember, you have to take a quiz. I'm not giving you a new chapter to read this time, because I'm giving you this time to catch up on the other ones. If you look at the grade setup for our class, articles are important. Actually, I need to add the chapter summaries. Chapter summaries actually should be a little larger, but chapter summaries are generally pretty large part of our grade. Actually, I messed up on this. You guys don't have too much committee assignments. So chapter summaries are 20% of your grade. That's a major chunk. It's not the hardest thing to do, but it does take time. All right. For this week, what you need to do instead of a chapter summary, if you're already caught up with that. First one is element of news, number 1. This is a discussion post. So after reviewing chapter 1, we did that last week, you will have practice figuring out what news is. In the following section, please find articles that represent the type of news story. Please provide a link to the article and a 1 or 2 sentences explain why the story fits the category. So I gave 4 different types of news. Proximity, human interest, conflict, and timeliness. What you need to do is find 4 different news stories. You don't have to read the whole thing, but find 4 different news stories that fit these categories. Proximities means nearby. Human interest means it focuses on one person. Conflict focuses on like a struggle. Like for example, proximity, we have wildfires near us. Human interest, if there was a story about George Floyd. Conflict, about recently 2 police officers were shot in Compton. Timeliness, anything that's happening right now. Like if you gave me a story about the Lakers going to the Western Conference Finals, right? You have to give me a link. So for example, this article is about the floods in Florida. That is timeliness, right? So timeliness, give the link. This is timeliness, as it is happening now in Florida. Incidents has been occurring last few weeks. And then I'll find one for human interest, right? So your job is to find an example of all four. Oh, hopefully Alexa, hopefully you can hear me. If not, I'll post the video up. I have a question ready. I just want to try. All right, Brian, what's your question?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I was reading. I did those notes, the chapter 2, and it says crazy titles that most newspapers and TV we use the like Mr., Mrs. and like those reference titles.
Yeah.
So like the people's like before added to people's names like last names. Why don't they use that anymore? Like what's the purpose?
Of what? Of using the last name?
That crazy titles are what happened?
Oh, why? Say that one more time. Why people don't use courtesy titles?
My titles being eliminated.
Oh, they're being eliminated. I think it's doing with our state of like the current generation, whereas not everyone, you can't completely tell if who's gonna want to go by Mr. or Mrs. anymore.
So then, for us writing our stories, if we're gonna get to that.
Yeah.
If we're ever gonna do that, are we allowed to use crazy titles, or is that something that we have to avoid?
If you know for sure, like if you do your story and you know for sure that they like that gender title, that's fine. But I think it's just comment on our current time period where you can't assume gender anymore, right? You can't assume that someone's going to go by Mr. or Mrs.
So how do we reference to that last name? Like, so you said it's respectful to say it like a last name, but how do we refer to that last name if we can't say Mr. or Mrs.?
Just I think even though it says that, just use their last name. Just say Valdivia said, right? Or Valdivia mentioned.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Last assignment for today, or this week, I mean, 5 W's. If you click on this, there is a worksheet. There's a worksheet. You need to answer this worksheet based off of any article, but the article has to come from any of these websites. So NPR, Washington Post, LA Times, New York Times, Vox. Keep in mind, NPR is a radio station and only have some articles, but fill this worksheet out based off of any article you find. It's just follow the questions, the guide. Our goal is to get examples and learn about writing. All right, so that's it for our class this time around. It took about 50 minutes. I'm going to post up the video hopefully by tomorrow of what you need to do for homework is elements of news and the 5 W's and the chapter 2 quiz. As a reminder, I'm not giving you a new chapter for this week because a lot of you guys are behind and I want you guys at least catch up on what's happening before I move on to the next section and before we get into our real writing. If you guys don't have any questions, feel free to head out. Actually, no, before you head out, please type your name into the chat box so I could take attendance. And so please type your name into the chat box. And after you do that, if you don't have any questions, I'll see you next week. Good luck. Do your homework.
Mister, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, mostly not a question. I want to know your opinion, actually.
Yeah, for sure.
Because you said that the articles, the ones that say 10 things about this or 10 facts of this, why would you consider them clickbait? Like, because when you were going through the slides and everything, while you were teaching, I also went through the slides as well while you were teaching them. And I noticed that even though they're different, they have the same thing. The headlines, they got quotes and everything. what makes them any more different than real articles?
It depends. I, I will say that there are some articles that are considered not clickbait, but sometimes when you go to somewhere like BuzzFeed, right? Um, what constitutes clickbait is if you go to an article, if you get to an article that's they promise something that doesn't deliver. I'll go find an example later, I guess. But we see a lot of this now. 21 tweets from this month so far that gave me a good laugh. 34 things under $20 that people actually swear by. It's just, they don't give enough facts anymore. The point of it is all hook without any information. They're just trying to get you to read it without you knowing what's about. In the past, headlines, the job of it was to give you as much information as possible. Now, what a lot of these news articles are doing is just trying to get you to read it, which is, I guess, it's part of the job, but you're supposed to learn about the story in the headline too. Does it make sense, Giovanni?
Yeah, it makes sense. It's because I'm like, I don't know why I have this habit of when someone's opinion is like sometimes correct or something, I tend to always question them. So it's like when you said that about them being clickbaits, I kind of thought like, because I used to go to some of those websites too, to like figure out how to do things,
Yeah.
like 10 facts of how to fix a game or something like that. So I would always go. And then right now when you were mentioning it, it came up to my mind, like some of them are fake, yeah, I get that, but like some of them also are the same thing, but we don't consider them as like articles, I guess. We just consider them clickbait. So it was like I was trying to oppose your opinions basically. It's
Yeah.
just a habit I have.
No, always do that. I mean, you should never take, even like a teacher, everything for facts. I mean, challenge everything. Because at the end of the day, I'm just a person that's same as you, and you could have more information on the topic. What I do want to say is that some of it is useful information, but a lot of articles that I've seen that come from uncredited sites, their job is trying to get you to go to their site, and for them, they don't make money by having good content. Sometimes they make money for you just going there because they get ad revenue. So the fact that I went here, if I click on any article, I click this and yeah, they get stats. Their stats go up, and the more stats they have, more advertisers are willing to give them money. So a lot of times companies thrive off of clicks, right? Clicks. So that's why I just said that sometimes they just create things for clickbait. And as you said, there are some articles that you read it and you're like, okay, that didn't give me what I wanted to know. It didn't actually tell me information. Yep.
All right, thank you, mister. Have a good one.
You too. All right. Any more questions?
For the question for the always reference to at the Times, is that like a reliable source, or because I do Fox News, because I believe Fox News is a reliable source. I really don't know.
Wait, say that one
Like
more time. You got cut off, Brian.
is it a reliable source, or is it like I mean like centered? Is it like both sides, or is it? I'm referencing off of Fox News, but I don't know if LA Times is a better, you know, I don't know how to call it. Whatever you call that middle.
Oh, it's a balance, right? So are you asking me if Fox News is a good source, a news source?
No, that's well, technically I'm asking for both, but LA Times and Fox News are both.
Um, well, typically I trust newspapers more. I think anything that's made for video, it's geared to entice people. I think if you watch Fox News at nighttime, the 1 hour show, it's more legitimate than if you watch like a show that's 24/7. Like you go to like Fox News on channel whatever, and it's all day. Then they're just trying to saying stuff to kind of say stuff. But all news generally has some validity. if they follow the things I tell you, if they give you balance, right? So for example, on Fox News, what they do a lot is they have Trump go speak there, but they never really have Biden go speak there or any like a Democratic Party. They have, so that's very one-sided. Um, you could tell someone is a little more legitimate by how they report the news, on the words they say. If they use too much adjectives, if they say too much on one side, then the news story is a bit slanted. Alexa, uh, yeah, class is over, and if you have questions, you can stick around. But if not, so see you next week. All right, Brian. Anything else?
Thank you.
For sure. I graded your chapter 1 though, so I fixed that for you.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I'm about to turn another one. All right, bye.
See ya. Do you have any questions, Maria?